You tap your card. A small machine beeps. A number slides from one account to another, and you walk out holding something that wasn't yours a second ago. You did this without thinking. You've done it 10,000 times. Money feels like one of the most natural things in the world, as natural as language, almost as old as fire. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Because the story you were told about where money came from is almost certainly wrong. You probably learned it in school. Long ago, before coins, people bartered. A farmer with extra grain would find a hunter with extra meat, and they would swap. But barter was clumsy. What if the hunter didn't want grain? What if the farmer needed shoes, but the shoemaker already had all the wheat he could use? Economists even have a phrase for this trap. They call it the double coincidence of wants, the rare moment when two people each happen to have exactly what the other one needs at exactly the same time. It almost never lines up. So, the story goes, humans invented money to escape the chaos. One thing everyone would accept. Clean. Simple. Obvious. There's just one problem. Anthropologists went looking for that world. The world of pure barter, the one that supposedly came before money. And they have never found it. Not once. Not anywhere. The barter story has a father, and his name was Adam Smith. In 1776, in his famous book The Wealth of Nations, Smith described early humans driven by a natural urge to truck, barter, and exchange. He pictured a butcher, a brewer, and a baker, each trading their surplus, until one day money quietly emerged to smooth the friction between them. It was an elegant idea. It was also a guess. Smith had no record of any such society. He was reasoning backward from the markets of his own century and assuming the deep past must have been a simpler version of the world outside his window. For 200 years, economists repeated his guess as if it were fact. Then the anthropologists went into the field. Caroline Humphrey, an anthropologist at Cambridge, spent her career studying real economies across Asia and beyond. Her verdict was blunt. No example of a pure barter economy has ever been described, and money has never once been seen to grow out of one. Sit with that for a second. The origin story printed in nearly every economics textbook on Earth describes a place that no human being has ever actually found. So, if money didn't come from barter, then where on earth did it come from? The answer was hiding in something far older than any coin. Older than markets. Something you still carry around inside you, right now, today. Debt. Not the kind with interest rates and credit scores. The human kind. The favor. The obligation. The quiet running tally you keep with the people around you, whether you mean to or not. Picture a small settlement, thousands of years ago. Your neighbor's roof caves in during a storm. You spend 3 days helping him rebuild it. No money changes hands. No price is ever spoken aloud. But something invisible has shifted between the two of you, an understanding that he now owes you. Not a number, a bond. And months later, when your own well runs dry, he's the first to share his water, and the scale quietly tips back toward even. This is not barter. Nobody is swapping equal goods on the spot. This is credit, a vast web of remembered favors stretched across an entire community, holding all of it together. The anthropologist David Graeber spent years untangling this. In his book Debt, The First 5,000 Years, he made a radical claim. Credit did not come after money. Credit came before it. Long before anyone hammered metal into coins, humans were already tracking who owed what to whom, in memory, in reputation, in trust. Money, Graeber argued, was not invented to replace barter at all. Money was invented to measure debt, to put a number on the obligations people already felt. And this is where it gets stranger. Some of the earliest writing the human beings ever produced was not poetry. It was not prayer or law. It was accounting. In ancient Mesopotamia, more than 5,000 years ago, people pressed careful marks into wet clay tablets, and an enormous share of those tablets are nothing but records of debt. This much barley owed, this much silver due, this many days of labor promised by harvest time. Writing itself, one of the most powerful inventions in our history, may have been born in part for a deeply ordinary reason. To keep the books, to remember exactly what you owe. Does that change the way you see the receipt crumpled in your pocket? But debt is still not the whole story. Because alongside the ledger, there was something even harder for the modern mind to truly grasp: the gift. In 1925, a French thinker named Marcel Mauss wrote a short, strange, brilliant book called simply The Gift. He had noticed a pattern echoing across cultures all over the world. In many societies, the most important exchanges were not trades at all. They were gifts. And a gift, Mauss realized, was never truly free. To accept one was to quietly take on an obligation to give something back, eventually, and often to give back even more than you received. Generosity turned into a kind of contest. Status and honor flowed not to the person who hoarded the most, but to the person who could afford to give the most away. You can see this with your own eyes in the Trobriand Islands, off the coast of New Guinea. The anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski lived among the islanders in the early 20th century, and what he described still sounds almost unbelievable. Men launched canoes into dangerous open ocean and paddled for hundreds of miles, risking their lives, in order to exchange shell necklaces and armbands. The objects had no practical use whatsoever. You couldn't eat them. You couldn't farm with them or fight with them. They simply circulated endlessly in a great ring between the islands. The necklaces traveling one direction and the armbands the other, passed from hand to hand for generations. Why would anyone gamble their life for a trinket they were only going to give away again? Because the gift was never about the object. It was about the bond the object created. Every single exchange tied two people, two islands, into a living relationship of trust and obligation that could endure for a lifetime. Stop and notice what's actually happening here. Long before money existed, human beings had already built rich, complicated economies out of memory, out of honor, out of relationships. The thing money supposedly fixed, that frustrating problem of barter, may never have been a real problem in the first place. Because most people, for most of human history, were not anonymous strangers haggling in a marketplace. They were neighbors, kin, people bound to one another by 1,000 invisible threads. So when did the hard money finally arrive? The coins, the shells, the things you could actually hold in your hand and count? It came, but rarely the way you'd imagine. For much of history, your fortune walked around on four legs. Cattle were among the very first great stores of wealth, and our language still quietly remembers it. The word capital comes from the Latin capit, meaning head, as in head of cattle. The word pecuniary, which means anything having to do with money, comes from pecus, the Latin word for livestock. Even your most modern financial vocabulary is still gently haunted by the cow. In other places, the money was small, and it came from the sea. For thousands of years, across enormous stretches of Africa and Asia, the humble cowrie shell served as currency. It was small, durable, almost impossible to fake, and quietly beautiful. Whole empires rose, taxed, and traded on shells you could cup in a single palm. And on one island in the Pacific, money grew almost absurdly large. On the island of Yap, in Micronesia, people used enormous carved stone discs called rai, some of them as wide as a car and far too heavy for any person to lift. When one of these stones changed owners, it did not actually go anywhere. It simply stayed exactly where it sat, and everyone on the island agreed that it now belonged to someone new. The community held the record in its memory. According to the famous story, one great stone slipped off a canoe and sank to the bottom of the sea on its way to the island, and yet it never lost its value at all. Its owner still owned it. Everyone simply knew. A fortune resting on the ocean floor, perfectly real, because an entire island agreed that it was. And that strange, sunken stone no one could ever touch again quietly reveals the secret hiding at the heart of all of it. Money has never really been the object. Not the coin, not the shell, not the giant stone. The object is only ever a token, a placeholder. The real money, the thing that actually moves between people, is the agreement. The shared belief, held together in the minds of everyone around you, that a certain thing carries worth. A stone at the bottom of the ocean is a fortune, as long as everyone remembers whose it is. A crisp piece of paper becomes worthless the instant people stop believing in it. which means money was never a thing your ancestors discovered, lying in the dirt like a vein of gold. It was a thing they agreed to imagine, together, a story so powerful that an entire species chose to believe it at once. And you are still imagining it. Right now, this very moment. Look at the numbers sitting in your bank account. Where exactly is it? It isn't a heap of coins in a vault somewhere with your name carved above it. It's a faint pattern of electricity in a server, a row in a database, an entry in a ledger, almost exactly like those clay tablets in Mesopotamia 5,000 years later. When you tap your card, no gold rolls down a chute. No silver crosses a counter. A number simply falls in one place and rises in another, and a vast, invisible web of total strangers quietly agrees to honor it. You don't trade chickens for shoes anymore, but you have never once stopped keeping the ledger. You remember who paid the last time. You feel that subtle weight settle in your chest when a friend quietly covers your meal. You can sense, without ever doing the math, the exact moment a relationship tips out of balance. That ancient instinct, the favor, the debt, the invisible thread between two people, never left you. It was never actually replaced by money. It was the very thing money was built on top of. The cards are new. The coins are new. But underneath all of it lies something far, far older than any currency ever minted. A species that survived against everything by remembering one another, by trusting, by keeping careful track of who it could count on. So the next time you tap your card and a number quietly slides from one account into another, remember what you're truly holding in that moment. Not metal, not paper, not a thing at all. Just a promise, the oldest promise your kind has ever made, to remember what you owe each other.